What is going on, guys? This is Crozen, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 companion build. This time we are finally on Jaheira in a build that I call the Fiery Gloomspore Druid. It's essentially a Spore Druid mixed in with a Gloomstalker Ranger, in a build that I feel like fits Jaheira's style perfectly because, she's one of those weird druids that likes to attack with her melee weapons, and that's what this build accomplishes, while still keeping her original weapon, which is the sylvan scimitar that she carries around when you first get her. And then you could also combine that with the flame blade, and that way you have a pretty unique and interesting build going on, and a build that does some very good damage. But you also have a lot of good versatility with this build. It's sort of like a Spellsword. So you can use Ice Storm, you have a lot of summons at your disposal as well, and you could even use some very good CC abilities like Hold Person or Confusion. So it's a really fun build that has a lot of versatility and really gives you that Spellsword vibe. So let's take a look at it. So beginning with our starting class and our ability points, you want to start out as a ranger. This way we already have that extra attack unlocked by the time we unlock Jaheira, whether that be level 8 or level 9 or level 10. For our favorite enemy, I go with Ranger Knight here, that way we get heavy armor proficiency. And then for Natural Explorer, Wasteland Wanderer Fire is going to be the best one here because there is so much fire damage in this game that being resistant to it is going to be so helpful. However, if you do have the Helldusk armor already, then you can just pick up the poison version, as that's the second most common one here. I believe it's more common than cold damage. Correct me if I'm wrong. For our ability points, there's really going to be 3 abilities that are going to be significant for this build. The main one being Wisdom. We're going to scale all of our damage with Wisdom, so just go up to 17 Wisdom with this build. Dexterity will be 14, mainly for initiative, and then 16 Constitution for our concentration spells. From there, I just went down to 8 Strength, 10 Intelligence, and 8 Charisma. For our skill proficiencies, I pick up Stealth, Insight, and Perception. So now we could go through our level path all the way up to level 12, and at this point it's really simple what we're trying to do here. We just want to go 5 straight levels in a ranger to unlock our extra attack. So we do get 2 spells. Most of these level 1 spells you can get from the druid side. There's only 3 spells here that you can't unlock as a druid. Those are going to be Ensnaring Strike, Hail of Thorns, and Hunter's Mark. So you can pick up Hunter's Mark here. Just don't get too comfortable using this if you are going to use Flameblade a lot with this build, simply because I cannot get Flameblade to work with Hunter's Mark. For whatever reason, it just doesn't show up in the combat log, even though it changes the damage to fire damage. So this is mainly going to be useful if you are going to be facing any type of enemies that are fire resistant, where you're just going to have 2 regular slashing scimitars instead, and you're going to get the bonus damage from Hunter's Mark that way. From there, you can just go with either Hail of Thorns or Ensnaring Strike. So I'm just going to pick up Ensnaring Strike here. And then we do get a fighting style. You want to go with 2 weapon fighting. That way your offhand attack will add your ability modifier, which in this case will be Wisdom. At level 3, we unlock our subclass, and this is where we're going to choose Gloomstalker Ranger. Gloomstalker is simply more powerful than Beastmaster or Hunter in a multiclass, simply because Beastmaster and Hunter really need 11 levels in those subclasses to get the best benefit, whereas Gloomstalker, at level 3, we can get Dread Ambusher, which gives us a +3 bonus to initiative, as well as an extra attack that we can make on our first turn, and that's going to be so useful with this build. Plus we can turn invisible if we really need to. We will also get an additional spell here, so this is where you just pick up Hail of Thorns, as the rest of these spells you can get from the druid side. So at level 4 we get our first feat, and for this feat all we want to do is just go with ability improvement and start stacking up our wisdom. Don't worry too much that our wisdom ends on an odd number, since we are going to get Jaheira's necklace in Act 3, which will raise up our wisdom to 20. So now that we're level 5, we get the main thing that we wanted for a ranger, and that is our extra attack. And some of you may be wondering, if extra attack is the main thing that we want at a ranger, why are we not going with fighter? Well, fighter does not get the same progression with spell slots that a ranger can get. So with a ranger, you will still be able to get a level 5 spell slot when you combine it with a druid multiclass. So that's one of the reasons why we go with ranger over fighter here. And then we also unlock level 2 spells, and you can get most of these from a druid other than silence. So just go ahead and select that one. So now that we're level 6, this is where we want to start heading into a druid. So go ahead and multi-class, add a class for a druid here, and then for our 2 cantrips, go ahead and select Guidance as well as Thorn Whip. So at level 7 we unlock our Druid subclass, and what we want to do here is select Circle of the Spores. Spore Druids just have a lot of nice synergy when you combine it with a melee attacker, simply because they have Symbiotic Entity, and what Symbiotic Entity will do is it will deal additional necrotic damage every time you attack with your melee weapon, and you could even stack this damage by casting Halo of Spores first as a reaction before you go into your melee attacks. So Spore Druids work out so well with melee attackers, and that's why we go with the Spore Druid over a Land or a Moon Druid. So at level 8 we unlock level 2 Druid spells, and we get 2 level 2 Druid spells that are going to be the core of our build, one of those being Flameblade. So you can use Flameblade in a lot of different ways, whether you cast this before you go into combat or you just use your bonus action while you're in combat and get Flameblade activated this way. And the cool thing is you can upcast this to a level 4, get additional damage, and I like to use Flameblade in my main hand, and the way you can get Flameblade to work in your main hand and still dual wield is only use your Sylvan Scimitar in your main hand before you cast Flameblade, and then what will happen is Flameblade will go into your main hand and then your Sylvan Scimitar will go into your offhand. So that's really what we want to do with this build. That's just going to give you the most damage and the most benefits, because Flameblade will also trigger an extra bonus action that you will be able to get in Act 3. So we also have Hold Person, and Hold Person is going to be very useful for this build because Flameblade deals a lot of damage with criticals. So having Hold Person means that not only will you deal more damage, but even your summons. We're going to get a lot of summons later on in this build, and that's just going to give them 100% accuracy as well as critical hits. At level 9 we get our second feat as well as an additional cantrip. For this cantrip I just go with Produce Flame. You can also go with the Shillelagh here, but we're not really going to see no uses for this with this particular build. For our feat you want to go with Savage Attacker here. Savage Attacker is just going to give you advantage on your damage rolls, and because we have so many different damage riders, Savage Attacker is just going to work out well, and it's going to really bump up your melee damage. So now that we're level 10, this is where we're going to start adding other features other than melee damage to this build. So now you will have an AoE attack with Call Lightning, you will also have Animate Dead, and then once we head into level 11, you will get Fungal Infestation, which means that you can summon 4 zombies to add on to this build. And then finally, once you hit level 12, this is where you will unlock Ice Storm, which will be your main AoE spell, as well as Conjure Woodland Being. So a good look at how this build is going to work end game. You're going to be able to summon a Woodland Being as well as a Wood Woad, and then you're also going to be able to summon 4 zombies thanks to Fungal Infestation, as well as your choice of whether you want to go with 3 Skeletal Archers, 3 additional zombies with Animate Dead, or if you want to summon a level 5 upcasted Flying Ghoul. All of these summons are going to be at your disposal with this build, and it's really going to make this build pretty cool, right? Because you're going to be a melee attacker as well as have all of these cool summons to fight by your side. So now we could take a look at the equipment for Jaheira, and the equipment loadout is pretty simple here. All you really want to do is stack as many damage riders as you can to enhance your melee damage, and then once you get into Act 3, pick up the Pyro Quickness Hat, as this will give you an additional bonus action every time you attack with your Flameblade, because Flameblade counts as a leveled spell. The downside to this is you will burn yourself, and that's just going to lower your health a little bit each turn. So to counter that, this is where we go with Helldusk Armor, because with Helldusk Armor, you cannot be burned. But if you don't care about being burned, then you can go with any kind of armor here that you want. Armor of Persistence is a really good one. So for our cloak, we're going to go with Cloak of the Weave for the spell save difficulty class and spell attack roll bonus. And the same thing applies here for Helldusk Gloves. We'll get a bonus of spell attack rolls as well as spell save difficulty class, as well as giving ourselves additional fire damage every time we attack with a melee weapon. You can also go with the flawed Helldusk Gloves here in Act 2. And then for our boots, we're going to go with the Disintegrating Night Walkers. This is mainly so that way we can't slip on ice, because that way we can use our Ice Storm and still go into that ice and not slip on it, so it's perfect in that regard. For our necklace, we're going to go with Khalid's Gift. This is going to bump up Jaheira's Wisdom to 20, which is what we want. And then from there, we're going to go with Callous Glow Ring and Caustic Band for the damage riders for our melee attacks. You can also go with Strange Conduit Ring, especially if you're going to concentrate on a spell, as that's going to give you additional damage with your weapon attacks too. So for our weapons, the way I like to use this build is only go in with the Sylvan Scimitar in my main hand, and then what will end up happening is whenever I cast Flame Blade, that will go ahead and move the Sylvan Scimitar to my offhand, and then I will get the Flame Blade in my main hand. So that's kind of how I like to use things, especially if the enemies are not resistant to fire damage. Now, if you do run into a scenario where you know the enemy is going to be resistant to fire damage, then what you can do is go with the Sylvan Scimitar in your main hand, and then put the Belm in your offhand, and then you can use the bonus action with Perfectly Balanced Strike. And Perfectly Balanced Strike is going to scale with your Sylvan Scimitar in your main hand, so you're not going to have to worry too much about that since it's just going to scale with Wisdom. Finally, I just go with the Deadshot for my bow. This will give us improved critical, and as I said, criticals are so massive with this build, so you kind of want to go with the Deadshot bow. If you do have another party member that is using this, then a good alternative will be Hellrider Longbow, which you can just use this for the initiative bonus. So now we could get into the fun stuff with a combat showcase here featuring Jaheira. So I do have Elixir of Bloodlust as well as Haste activated, just to make sure the fight goes by quicker and I'm able to showcase more abilities. And then I also used Flame Blade outside of combat, that way it already starts in my main hand, and I still have that bonus action available. And the cool thing about Flame Blade is that once you attack with it, you're going to get that extra bonus action because it counts as a fire spell and it's going to work with the Pyro Quickness hat. So what we can do to start out with this fight is simply go into an Ice Storm. So that way we can showcase the AoE spell damage here. And you can use this, especially if there are a whole bunch of enemies like this. Obviously, it's not going to be as strong as something like Fireball, but you can actually knock enemies prone with this just from the initial spell. So we didn't accomplish that in this case, but that is okay. So now what we can do is use our Halo of Spores, and we can use this on just about any enemy here. I wish this had a little bit higher accuracy, but it's just what it is because it is a Constitution save. So I'm just going to go ahead and use it on this enemy right here. And then what we can also do is use Hold Person and showcase the CC abilities that Jaheira has here against humanoids. So I'm just going to go ahead, activate it on this enemy. Also this enemy over here, since they have a 98% chance. And then we'll just go on these two enemies over here at the top. And now we could get into our melee damage. So we can start out with Dread Ambusher. And I'm just going to go ahead and use it on this enemy over here since they have a lot of health. And yeah, the criticals can do so much damage with this build because Flame Blade just has some crazy critical damage. And then you also have Savage Attacker, so all of these riders are just going to stack up and give you some good critical damage with that ability. So now what we can do is just go into our offhand attack and start using these, and as you can see we got two of them because we did attack with Flame Blade with Dread Ambusher. So now we could just keep on doing that. So do one more attack here, take that enemy out, and then go back over here and take that guy out. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hide over here so that way I don't break concentration and get ganked by those three enemies over there and end it here. So now we could also take advantage of our summons and deal some very good damage. Their biggest weakness though is accuracy. However, when you do have Hold Person activated, you do not have to worry about accuracy because you will be 100% accurate whenever you attack an enemy that is CC'd with Hold Person. So what we can do here is just go into our Strengthened Shillelagh. I call this Shillelagh, that's just the way I pronounce it, even if it is wrong. And then we could go over here and just get our regular attack now that we have this thing strengthened. And as you can see, it can do 42 damage on a critical, which is quite high. And then we could also do that for our Woodwode. So with our Woodwode, we can just jump over here and use our Twisting Branch. You actually want to use Twisting Branch over the main hand attack because this one only does 5 to 8 damage, whereas this does 8 to 20. So let's just go ahead and use that here. And we get another nice critical with 26 damage there. We could also do the same thing here for our undead minions. So we're just going to go ahead, go right back into this enemy, get a critical. Let's get one more critical, and that should be enough to take this enemy out, as well as spawn a newborn zombie. And then we could just keep it going from there. So then we could just go over here and attack this enemy, assuming we could hit them, and just keep it going from there. As you can see, the accuracy is only 50%. So that's going to be one of the biggest weaknesses to these zombies, and really all of your summons in general. But if you do manage to hit with these zombies, it's just going to add on to all of the damage that you can do per round. So now we're in turn 2, and we could basically just clean up at this point. So I'm going to use a main hand attack here. That way we can get our extra bonus action, and just use our bonus action right now. Spawn a newborn zombie, and then we could go over here and do some other interesting things. So we can use Halo of Spores. I could probably just use it on this guy and kill him that way. So let's just go ahead and do that, get that out of the way. And then use our extra bonus action here. We get a nice critical, which is perfect. And then just use a main hand attack and finish the fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed my Jaheira Fiery Gloomspore Druid build, and yeah, I just really love this build. It really fits her style because she really likes to dual wield those scimitars, and you get that with this build with Flame Blade, as well as her original Sylvan scimitar weapon that she carries around when you get her in Act 2. And this build is amazing because it comes online as soon as you unlock her. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this build in the comments, and let me know what other types of builds you want to see in Baldur's Gate 3, and I will see you in the next video.